But the Ukraine war, where it is going right now, it is exactly the way the Vietnam War started. And many of you in this room recognize it.
No, the historical ignorance of these people never ceases to amaze me. I mean, would it really kill these people to pick up a history book once in a while? Is she really trying to say that the reason that the brutal Russian invasion began is because of French colonialism?
I want to walk you through some things. Lyndon B. Johnson is very similar to Joe Biden. How are they the same? They're both Democrat socialist. Lyndon B. Johnson was the majority leader in the Senate. Does that sound familiar? He was vice president to Kennedy. Joe was vice president to Obama. His big socialist programs were the Great Society. The Great Society were big government programs to address education, medical care, urban problems, rural poverty, transportation, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, and welfare, the Office of Economic Opportunity, and big labor and labor unions. Now, LBJ had the Great Society, but Joe Biden had Build Back Better, and he still is working on it. The largest public investment in social infrastructure and environmental programs that is actually finishing what FDR started, that LBJ expanded on, and Joe Biden is attempting to complete. Socialism.
You know, when I heard that the Turning Point political action cult was having their all-star get-together headlined by Donald Trump, I knew I was going to get a few clips here and there, but what I did not have in my bingo card is having Marjorie Taylor Greene pretty much do campaign ads for Joe Biden, because I didn't detect anything in what she just said that was bad, or in any way supposedly supposed to be a bad look for Joe Biden. But let's face it, when you're talking about an event put on by Big Head Charlie Kirk, headlined by Donald Trump, with speakers that include Donald Trump Jr., Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz, Tucker Carlson, Meghan Kelly, Ted Cruz, and the rest of the freaks, inevitably the craziness was bound to show its face. And fortunately enough, for people that have to sit through this nonsense, it didn't take very long.
So let's compare Ukraine and Vietnam, shall we?
Well, those are two totally different conflicts, fought for two totally different reasons, with completely different political ramifications, fought in two totally separate generations. But sure.
Before the Ukraine war, Joe Biden said, "We will not get involved." He said, "Ukraine is not a NATO ally of ours." He said, "The United States will stay neutral."
I mean, I really do hate to keep stopping you, Marge, but are you sure that's what he was saying? Because I remember him saying things like this.
Do I think he'll test the West, test the United States and NATO as significantly as he can? Yes, I think he will. But I think he'll pay a serious and dear price for it that he doesn't think now will cost him what it's going to cost him. And I think he'll regret having done it.
And things like this.
Start by first saying a few words about Russia and Ukraine. I've been absolutely clear with President Putin. He has no misunderstanding. If any assembled Russian units move across the Ukrainian border, that is an invasion. But it will be met with severe and coordinated economic response that I've discussed in detail with our allies, as well as laid out very clearly for President Putin. But there is no doubt, let there be no doubt at all, that if Putin makes this choice, Russia will pay a heavy price. The Ukrainian foreign minister said this morning that he's confident of our support and resolve, and he has a right to be.
Now, Joe Biden wants to send F-16s. He wants to send cluster munitions.
Now, if it were up to me, I'd say send every bird and helicopter that we have sitting around doing absolutely nothing and hang us all across the country. And I hate to break it to you, Marge, but we already set the cluster munitions. Now, this is where Marjorie Taylor Greene gets to show you just how effective she is in Congress.
I had an amendment on that last week and it failed. I tried to stop it. I had an amendment on stopping F-16s, it failed. Long-range missiles, I had an amendment on that, it failed.
Yeah, wicked good job, Marge. You're doing great. Everything you sign, amend, or talk about seems to fail. And what an unbelievable waste of taxpayer money. I mean, I bet your constituents are really happy hearing that everything you touch fails and goes to shit. I mean, thank God you threatened Kevin McCarthy's life to get on all these committee assignments so you could show the world just how incompetent you really are. Now, because we're talking about a meeting of the village idiots, Marjorie Taylor Greene was far from the only unhinged speaker to take the stage at this year's Turning Point Politicult convention. Nope, Donald Trump Jr. also spoke, and I don't think anybody's going to be very surprised when I tell you about the slight infatuation he had with the cocaine found at the White House recently.
Oh! Thank you, sir, for giving me that opening. Well, according to Twitter, it was mine. Like, you have the world's most famous crackhead in residence. And somehow it was mine, according to Twitter. I haven't been there in like 3 years. I mean, think about that. Hey, I had a Secret Service detail. I've been through all the security protocols. I get it. My guys, who I stayed in touch with, many of them just dear friends, they're like, hey, dude, there's no way you would have gotten away with that. I go, I know. Luckily, I don't snort cocaine. Like, it's not my thing.
Well, it looks like Don Jr. finally smartened up to the fact that if you're gonna deny that the cocaine isn't yours, you probably shouldn't say it's only because you haven't been to the White House in 3 years. At least lie to the people at the end of it and say that cocaine isn't your thing. Here he is immediately not doing a very good job of convincing people 8 balls on his thing when he absolutely loses his mind and pulls out his racist card big time when he talks about Joy Reid getting into Harvard. After she shared with the world that she was overqualified for Harvard, had test scores that were off the charts, and still needed affirmative action to get in.
You saw? How awesome was it watching Joy Reid? It was the first time I've watched in so long, but it was so nice. Oh my God! I went to Harvard, and I would have never gotten into Harvard if it wasn't for affirmative action. I'm like, are you kind of, like, I don't understand. Like, you're saying, I was not academically qualified. I was not particularly good at anything. I wasn't really bright, but I got into Harvard because of affirmative action. I go, but don't you think you took, like, someone's spot who maybe actually deserved to be there?
And don't get it twisted. What Donald Trump Jr. is actually saying there is that she took a spot from a white person. And here he is going straight from racism to bigotry and trans hate, calling trans a protected class, saying they can do whatever they want, which is absolute nonsense, and talking about trans terrorists like that's a thing somehow. And unfortunately, this vile, bigoted, disgusting, delusional, hateful, and frankly dangerous rhetoric is becoming all too common and all too popular among right-wingers nowadays.
When we have an FBI and a DOJ that would call concerned mothers and parents domestic terrorists for going to a PTA meeting and being concerned about the indoctrination of our children. When you have an FBI that seems to miss every actual terrorist, they're on the list, but they're woke or they check a couple boxes, so we can't actually look at them because somehow finding like bad guys would be like out of the job description. Instead of doing that, they're going to focus on looking at Catholic churches because you must be a real extremist, right? They won't look at like trans terror because, if you're trans in 2023, you're like the most protected class in the history of the world. You can literally do anything you want and nothing will happen to you. We haven't seen the manifestos because, I've heard all sorts of other terrors are terror except for trans terror. That's different. That's special. You get protected.
Next up on the bigot bus, we have Tucker Carlson, who honestly sounded like he got roofied. I don't know what the hell he was on. I don't know if he had one too many glasses of wine or if somebody slipped this guy an edible, but he made Don Jr. sound like he could have been the designated driver on that bus.
Really? That was awesome. Do it! My whole life. This is running the world. Like, what wouldn't they do? Oh, right, good point. Probably not a racist insurrection. What? Shut up! Racist insurrectionist? Sorry, I was so into it, I lost all self-awareness for a minute. Sorry. But beat the crap out of him. He's wrong. They're saying crazy things like the water's turning the frogs gay. What a crazy person. Let's make him pay $1 billion. Water's actually turning the frogs gay. That's true. Turns out. Years later, they tell us. Turns out it's true. Yeah, it's actually true.
Yeah, whatever the hell that was. I'm guessing Tucker woke up with a little bit of a headache. After Tucker was done giggling and crackling like a stoned hyena, he managed to pull himself together to slur a few xenophobic sentences together, kind of like the ones we've been accustomed to listening to on his show over the years.
I can just say, the foreign policy stuff, which if you grew up in this country, once again, as I did, you're not really used to thinking about because, it's literally oceans away. And they're like all these primitive people out there doing primitive things, tattooing their faces and being, you know what I mean? They're foreigners. Who knows what they do? I get it. I grew up like that. I was proud to be an ugly American, and to some extent I still am. I'll have the pizza, please.
We also got to find out that Tucker really hates graffiti. So much so, he equates it to the end of civilization itself. And listen, I don't know if this is the vino talking again, or if that 10 milligram edible was actually a 100 milligram edible and he just didn't realize it, but check out this word salad.
More people sleeping on the street? Is it dirtier? Is there graffiti? Graffiti? Ooh, graffiti. What is graffiti? That's not art. It's vandalism. And when it's allowed to stand, what does it say? We've given up. We don't care. We're allowing people who create nothing to destroy what we built, and we're not fighting back. Graffiti is like one step from total society collapse, period. What you're saying when you allow graffiti is we have no self-respect at all. We don't care enough about our civilization to keep it clean, to keep it pretty. Previous generations worked their whole lives, gave everything they had just to put in sidewalks, just to put in gas lines, just to build concrete buildings, and we're letting someone who's never done anything of value for our society destroy it with vandalism. And we don't have a problem with that. Well, no, it's not a big deal. It's just graffiti. They're graffiti artists. No, this is a sign of the collapse of civilization. Period.
Well, shit. If he's that upset about a little paint on the side of buildings, he's going to be really fucking upset when he hears about all those white supremacists in the buildings and churches and businesses they burned down in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921 during the 2-day massacre. Now that's when you start talking about the end of civilization. And obviously no video about these disgusting deplorables would be complete without the head MAGA moron, Donald Trump himself. Here's the former leader of the free world in one clip not only admitting to denying homeless people what little shelter they have, but also calling Washington, D.C. the crime capital of the world, saying that it smelled bad, and also saying that the federal government should quickly take over Washington, D.C. to control its crime. Which is oddly ironic because I think there's one political party that has been pushing for Washington, D.C. to have statehood for a while now. I just can't think of what party that was.
In Washington, D.C. on the 4th of July, Washington, D.C., so beautiful and not beautiful anymore. I kept it beautiful. If I saw 1 tent or 2 tents or 3 tents as I was coming in from the airport, I'd have them taken down immediately because I knew that you'd have 100 tents and 1,000 tents if you don't do it. But you should see Washington, D.C. right now. In Washington, D.C. on the 4th of July, 9 people were viciously shot in a single drive-by shooting that targeted an Independence Day celebration, including a 9-year-old child. It's about time for the federal government to take over Washington, D.C. and run it properly, run it with sense, run it strongly, and end the crime. Washington, D.C., crime has become a crime capital of the world. Our national capital is not being taken care of the way it should be. We have to take care of it. We have to cherish it. We have to love it. And if we don't do that, it's very, very sad. You take a look at the numbers. People don't want to come in anymore. You have tents all over. The sidewalks smell. It's a horrible thing. The federal government has to take it over and do everything that has to be done, and it has to be tippy-top. It has to be perfect, and bring it back and make it better than it ever was.
I don't know about you, but I just will not vote for any presidential candidate that doesn't have tippy-top in his vocabulary.
I know words. I have the best words.
Donald Trump also once again brought out that stupid snake poem that he always reads, which honestly says more about the dumbass woman that would cuddle a friggin' poisonous snake than it does about the snake coming into the lady's home. I'm sorry. And obviously no Trump speech would be complete without a little whining and bitching and complaining about being indicted, and obviously lying straight to the faces of everybody in that audience.
They indicted me. They think of it. You don't have to be a lawyer to understand those words. That's very as simple as it gets. They indicted me. In other words, whatever documents a president decides to take with him, he has the absolute and unquestioned right to do so. This is a law that was passed and signed. And that's the law, and that's the way it is, and it couldn't be more clear.
Unfortunately, it still says a lot about our country that people like this can still draw a crowd, and they can honestly believe that the President of the United States has the ability to take any documents he wants out of the White House with any repercussions whatsoever. But as long as these people are going to keep meeting and keep spreading lies and hate to the American people, I'm going to be right here calling it out on the Midas Touch Network. Please hit the like button. Please feel free to subscribe. It's all free. Tell them Boston Brian sent you. Until then, every single one of us should be doing the same thing and calling out every single one of these people every chance we get.